What's up, guys? In this video I'm going to be showing you how to begin a still life drawing. A still life is a drawing of something that doesn't move. Typically artists will do things like fruit, which is what I'm going to use. I'm going to be drawing this apple. This is not a real apple, it's plastic. Oftentimes they also draw flowers or just any other objects. Sit down, sit still, look at, and they can observe it very carefully. And that's what we're really going to be learning here with the still life drawing, is how to look at something and very carefully observe it and try to capture it as realistically as possible. So before I start to draw, just to let you know how you need to set your paper up. So it doesn't matter if you draw with your paper side to side, landscape style like this, or if you draw it in portrait style. It doesn't matter to me how you do that. Make sure you write your name on the back of your paper. You want to have your paper in front of you, and then you want your object, which you're going to need to be sharing your objects, the person that you sit next to, or you can split your objects between each other if you want. We'll have a couple of apples, a couple of pears on the table, and if you want to do an apple and the other person wants to do a pear or whatever, it doesn't matter to me. You can do more than one object. If you want to group two apples together and share with your partner, that's fine. You work that out with your seat partner. And then after that, once you set your subject up, you don't want to touch it. You want it to stay the same, and you want to kind of try to memorize how you positioned it, because you're only going to be working on these for a few minutes, at a time during class. And when you come back, you're going to want to reset up your still life the way that you had it. Now, the good thing is you're making a drawing, so your drawing will kind of be like your note on how to do that. So I've got my apple set up here. I've got my pencil, got a good eraser. I've got my piece of paper. I'm ready to start drawing. So now in this part of the video, I'm going to start to draw. You're only going to be able to see my paper here. You're not going to be able to see the apple, but you saw how I set it up. I'm going to be looking at my apple, starting to sketch it. And when you begin a drawing like this, you don't want to use really thick, hard lines like this, because those are very difficult to erase. They take a lot of effort, and they don't always come off all the way like this. So don't do that. Instead, the type of line that you want to make is a gentle, sort of light line. And what you're really trying to do, you're feeling out where the shapes are for what you're trying to draw. So an apple, we can start with sort of a circle right here. I do have the area of the apple, and I'll move it here so you can see this little area here where the stem goes in. So something like that. So I'm making kind of like little notes to where I see everything, and I'm trying to very carefully just position all of these things before I start really getting into the drawing. And I notice, like over here on this side, there's more of an angle. Every apple is going to be different. They're not all exactly the same. You want to draw your apple, not think an apple looks like, but what your apple actually looks like. So I'm just going to do some drawing here really quick, and we'll come back in a minute. I've done a little bit of drawing here, and I want to talk to you a little bit about what I've done. What I'm trying to do here is I'm trying to look at the apple, and I'm trying to find where are the brighter areas. So the brighter areas are going to be up in this top part. I'm trying to add value. Value is dark and light. So the brighter parts are up here, and the darker areas are down towards the bottom of the apple. And of course, this down here is the shadow. So all I'm trying to do is I'm trying to go through and add the dark areas and kind of build them up, make them really dark, and then areas here where there are shadows, there's shadows all along the side right here. I'm just taking my pencil and lightly shading them. That's what we mean when we say values. Some areas are very dark, some areas are very light, and then there's all these in between. And that's what you got to kind of do. You got to look at the object with your eye and decide where are the dark areas, where are the light areas, where are the in-between areas. And kind of get them marked down and drawn out as best you can by looking at what you're trying to draw. And of course you want to emphasize the edge a lot, especially down here by the shadow. You want this area to be really, really the darkest part, because when you look at your object, you'll see the part where it touches the table, that little area where that little shadow is cast, that's always the darkest area. All along the side here should be pretty light. And if you don't want your shading to look like lines like this, what you can do is take your finger, go through and start to rub and smudge these lines. And the more graphite that you put on here, graphite is what pencil lead is, it'll be able to smudge, so you may need to go over it a couple times. Also, another thing that you can do to blend these is to take your eraser and just gently rub the eraser over the shaded areas. Not too much to where it takes the graphite off, but more to where it's almost like you're smoothing it out. Smooth these areas out, and you'll see the line disappears a little bit, so it looks more natural, more like what you're seeing, but you didn't know you could draw with an eraser. We want to get the shadows and the values marked down and drawn before we do any of that. And then we're going to do the same thing with the color. Use your eraser and just lightly smooth out these areas, these lines. You can even come up here and drag some of the graphite up into this area. This is how to add value to your drawing. Of course, you're going to want to go in once you get it to where you think it looks pretty good. You want to go in and all those little sketched lines that kind of went out of bounds, take your eraser and clean them up. Try to make your drawing look good. And also, I marked the edge of the table here. This area right here, I could make this into a, we could imagine that this is the table and maybe this is the ground, so maybe this is a darker area. And if we make this area here darker, it'll make our fruit appear to be popping more out from the surface, because darker colors to our eye push back and brighter colors push forward. It's just the way that our eyes work. It's the way that light works. So once you get this value drawn out and it looks pretty good, then we can move on to color. Pretty much feeling good about this drawing here. I think I've got the value down pretty close. Clean your erasers off. Also, I added a stem to my apple, even though my apple doesn't have one, just because I thought it would add a little bit more realism to my drawing, make it a little bit easier for people to recognize the subject of my drawing with the stem. With my value done, I'm ready to move on to adding color. You may have some areas here from when you were sketching where you erased, the lines didn't go away all the way, like right in this area here. I got a little bit of shadowing. Don't worry about that, because we're gonna cover this with layers of colored pencil. That's gonna get completely covered up and obliterated. All right, this last part of the video, I'm going to work on adding color to my drawing. Now my apple is green, so I've got a green colored pencil. I also have a yellow colored pencil because I may want some areas of this apple, since it's sort of a lighter green, to be more yellowish, so I can layer these two colors to achieve that. I've also got this sort of turquoise green here, so I'm just going to experiment with that a little bit. I'm not necessarily worried about getting the color exact. Now I also have a red colored pencil here, because what we're going to do with this part of the drawing in the adding color, we're going to be using green's complementary color. And if you look at the color wheel, complementary colors are colors that are opposites each other on the color wheel. So on the color wheel, green and red are opposites. So that means that they're complementary colors. Now, why is that important? One of the ways to create really realistic shadows is to use a color's complementary color in the shadowy area. So if I color this apple green, and then I take red and I go in here into these darker areas where there's a lot of shadow, I'm gonna create a dark shadowy color that is better than using black. Black is a little bit too stark of a color. You can use black to create shadows, and for this drawing, we're not gonna use black. We're gonna use the complementary color, because we're gonna use color theory, basically. Using complementary colors is part of color theory, for how the color wheel works. First thing, I'm just gonna start by adding green, so I'll be back. All right, so I just added a light color of green. I did not press very hard. I just kind of lightly shaded the whole thing. Now what I'm gonna do, and you may have noticed that when I was coloring it, the green down here sort of combined with the heavier areas of my pencil drawing to add to the shadow, and that's a good thing. Now I'm gonna go down in here and really make this dark by adding just a little bit of red to this really dark shadowy area. I'm not pressing very hard with my pencil at all, really lightly. And you don't wanna add red to the whole apple. You only wanna use the complementary color in the shadowy dark areas. So in some areas, you want it to be red. Using the red the complementary color of green is only for the shadowy areas. You want to leave the areas that look the most green. You can also take your lighter color and go in and blend and make those areas that are brighter. So I've got my brighter yellow. So these top areas here of my apple that I'm looking at. You can also use white too. White color pencil you can add as a top layer, blending colors together. So if I take a white color pencil and I start coloring on it, it's going to take the colors and kind of mix them, almost like stirring them on the surface. It's pretty neat. Works really well, and it makes your drawing look really smooth. So the more layers that you add, the smoother your drawing starts to look. In this little area here, and I'm going to add some red in here in the dark. And one of the ways, and you might notice that this looks really red here, but if I go back in with my green and I blend, that red goes away and it just turns into a shadow color. Another thing that you can do to blend your colors is, again, get your eraser, go through and just kind of smudge the colors together. It'll lighten it up a little bit if it gets too dark. Go in and lighten it up a little bit and smudge the colors together and smooth. And just keep working on it until it starts to look really, you know, pretty accurate. I've got some red marks here where the stem goes. To create the stem color, don't use brown, take your red, color parts of the stem red. And of course, if you're using other colors, like if you have a red apple, you would reverse this. You would use red color as the dominant color and then use the green as the complementary color. Color pencils actually blend pretty well. Continue working on adding color, and then we'll talk about the background.